Hello there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Charlie and I have been doing a vlog series about my experiences with recurrent miscarriage, and in this fourth video I'm going to talk in more detail about my fourth and fifth miscarriages. So if you caught the last video, I talked a bit about my rainbow baby, which came after my third loss. So after I'd had the molar pregnancy, we tried again once I was given the all clear, and fell pregnant, and of course it was terrifying. Even when we got to kind of the safe point, I just really struggled to believe that I was going to end up with a baby. That time round I was allowed an early scan. I was allowed to have a scan at 8 weeks just to rule out molar pregnancy. So I had that and there was a baby and a heartbeat and everything looked fine. But I'd had that same experience with my second loss, so I didn't feel out of the woods just yet. I went for a private scan at 10 weeks and everything still looked absolutely fine. There was a perfect baby, heart beating away, and I began to hope that this would be my rainbow. And he was! Hooray! So yeah, it was a very fraught and anxious 9 months. I don't think, even when I was giving birth to him, literally in this spot that I'm sitting in right now, I was just terrified that the worst was still going to happen. But once he was out and he was in my arms and he was squawking and he was evidently absolutely fine, it took a long time to really sink in that I finally had this baby that we'd been trying for 2 years. Amazing. It's our little rainbow baby, little Rufus. He is now asleep upstairs. He's 15 months old and he is perfect, apart from the fact that he won't sleep in his own bed. But anyway, when I was pregnant with him, we were both pretty much in agreement that he was going to be our last. The plan had always been to have 4, but it had never been part of the plan to suffer so much. The struggles that we experienced to get to number 3 was something that neither of us wanted to go through again. So that whole pregnancy, we were pretty adamant that he was our last one. We were just going to count our blessings and stick with 3. We were both in agreement about that, I think. Then, after I had Rufus, he was so worth it. He was absolutely 100% worth every heartbreak, every tear that I'd cried, every agonising time I'd been in that scan room and been told there was no heartbeat. He was completely worth every single bit of it. And I began to think that even if we went through it all again, even if we decided to try and we went through it all again, ultimately, if we got another rainbow at the end of it, it would be worth it. Spouse was kind of like, no, you know, happy as we are, got 3 perfect children, like, let's just leave it at that. But I think because I'd always wanted 4, I just really struggled to close the door on that 4th baby. We sort of talked about, okay, well, let's try, and if it doesn't work, let's just leave it at that. Although I knew that if we started trying, I would have to see it through. I'd have to keep going until someone said you physically can't have any more babies, or we ended up with a baby. So we talked about it for quite a long time. We weren't really on the same page for a while. But ultimately I think we both thought the chances of it happening again were tiny. The whole way through, the last 2 years, all the losses, every single time I'd seen anyone about it, I'd been told it's just bad luck. It's just bad luck. I figured I'd had a lot of bad luck and I probably wasn't due anymore, and if we were to try again, the chances of anything going wrong were minimal. There was no reason why we wouldn't just fall pregnant and have a healthy baby like we had done the first 2 times, and like we had done with Rufus. In the end, we agreed that we would try again. Rufus must have been about 10 months old and I found out I was pregnant, And my initial reaction was sudden fear at the thought of having 4 children. It just suddenly seemed like a lot of kids, and I was sort of like, oh my god, what are we doing? Why have we agreed to this? This is crazy. But also I was really, really excited. And I told myself that it was going to be fine. There was no reason it shouldn't be. My last pregnancy with Rufus, I hadn't done anything differently, and I managed to produce a healthy baby. So there's clearly nothing wrong with me, and this baby was going to be totally fine. But at about 5 weeks, I started to get a bit nervous because I just didn't have any sickness. I didn't get anything with Rufus until I was 8 weeks, so I kept telling myself, it's fine, it's normal. But it was playing on the back of my mind. So I took a clear blue digital test, so it should have said 3+ on the screen, and that in my mind was, if it says that, I know that my hormone levels are where they should be and everything's okay. So I took that test and it came up 3+, everything's okay. My hormones are where they should be, I'm pregnant, it's all fine. We started to make plans, we started to talk about names, and I just tried to enjoy it. I didn't want to go through another pregnancy feeling afraid and feeling anxious and feeling stressed. I just wanted to enjoy it. So I tried to, and I managed to, I think. I was still very nervy. I was still constantly going to check my pants and make sure I wasn't bleeding. Every little twinge, I convinced myself, this is it, I'm miscarrying again. A few days after I'd taken that pregnancy test, I got a very, very, very tiny bit of spotting. It was like just slightly pink on the tissue, and I just knew, in the 3 healthy pregnancies that I've had, I haven't even had an inkling of bleeding. I've had absolutely nothing. So instantly I knew that something was wrong. I called the EPU the next day, and once again they really kind of fobbed me off. It's normal, it's nothing to worry about. But I knew it wasn't normal for me. It was a very bad and very, very worrying sign for me. So eventually they said that they would give me a scan in just over a week's time, when I was going to be nearly 7 weeks. So it was quite a long wait, but there was not really anything else I could do, so I just went with it. I didn't have anything else, no more pain, no more bleeding. Time continued to tick on, and I was sort of thinking it was just a false alarm. I'm going to go for my scan next week, and there's going to be a heartbeat, and everything's going to be totally fine. But then at 6 weeks, pretty much bang on, I started to bleed, and there was no mistaking it. It was heavy, it was fresh, it was red, and I knew that I was miscarrying. I didn't need to go and see a doctor, I didn't need to go for a scan. I knew that I was miscarrying. I called up the EPU and I told them what had happened, and they agreed, yeah, it sounds like a miscarriage, you don't need to come for the scan. And that was it. I didn't hear from anyone else, I didn't go for any kind of follow-up or confirmation or anything like that. I just miscarried. It wasn't overly painful, it was very much like my first miscarriage, just like a heavy period. I didn't really even pass any clots or anything, it was just lots of bleeding. And then about 2 weeks later the bleeding stopped, and I just assumed that it was all done. A couple of weeks after that we went on a holiday that we'd had planned for quite a while, and while we were away I suddenly had really, really, really severe stomach pains, and then started to pass like black blood and clots, and after a bit of googling we realised that I hadn't passed the whole pregnancy, and it was happening now in a hotel room in New York, which wasn't ideal. And that was that. Another miscarriage done. I just couldn't believe it happened again. And I couldn't believe that people kept telling me there's nothing wrong, it's just bad luck. I was so angry, like how can anyone be that unlucky? How can someone lose 4 babies? How out of 7 pregnancies can I have lost more than half of them? That's not just bad luck, there must be something wrong. No one would help, no one would do any tests and no one would help. So I was just left in limbo and I was sad and I was angry and I was worried that this was just going to keep on happening. At that point, the spouse was kind of the opinion that we should just stop. I didn't agree. I knew I wasn't going to be able to. Once I got into my mind that we were going to have another one, I'd spent 2 weeks pregnant, or knowing that I was pregnant with a 4th baby, and making all those plans in my head and getting to grips with the fact that I was going to be a mum of 4, and suddenly that was all gone and I wasn't ready to give up on that. Bizarrely, before I'd even got pregnant that time, I had got a letter in the post from the gynecology unit at Leeds with an appointment in the November. It didn't say what it was about, it just said it was at gynecology. So I assumed, because I've been told numerous times that I wasn't eligible to see the recurrent miscarriage clinic, I assumed that it was about my cervix. I had a complication after a LETS procedure on my cervix back in February, which resulted in a hemorrhage, and I thought it was just a follow-up from that. It was about 6 months later and it made sense that that's what it would be about. So I went along to that appointment in the November and the consultant didn't understand why I was there. I didn't understand why I was there. And when I mentioned my cervix, he said, no, that's not what I deal with. I work in the miscarriage clinic. Well, incidentally, I've just had my 4th miscarriage. And he wanted to listen to me. I honestly could have high-fived the guy. He asked me about my history. I went through all my 7 pregnancies, 3 healthy ones, 4 losses, and explained it all to him. And he just sort of said, yeah, that sounds like a hormone imbalance. Easily fixed, HCG injections, Bob's your uncle, that was it really. I was absolutely elated. I was so happy that someone was willing to help me and that he thought he could. He said he would run all the basic tests that they do in the miscarriage clinic. So I had a lot of blood taken and he said he would send those off and I would have an appointment with him in 6 weeks to discuss, but he was 99% certain it was a hormone thing and that as soon as I fell pregnant I could ring this lady called Sharon and she would give me HCG injections and that would hopefully give me a healthy baby at the end of it. About a week after that appointment I got a letter through from the consultant saying that actually they were going to put me on progesterone because I've had a molar pregnancy and the HCG would be too high risk for me. That really put a dampener on things because in the consultation that I'd had with him, he did actually say that progesterone was pretty pointless. It hadn't been shown to improve outcomes in pregnancies. So I was a bit gutted that they decided they were going to put me on that. But that was all it said, just to call as soon as I found out I was pregnant, and that was that. I had an appointment booked with him for the 29th of December. I found out on Christmas Day morning that I was pregnant again. I called up the hospital on Boxing Day and they kind of passed me around a bit, but they ultimately said, oh yeah, we've got this note on the system that you're going to be put on progesterone. You can come in and pick up the prescription. So I went in and got that and started it the same day. And I was in 2 minds. Part of me felt confident because I felt like I was doing something. Part of me was really worried because, of course, I googled it and the first thing that came up was a big study done by the National Miscarriage Association that had proven that progesterone really makes no difference to the outcome of pregnancies for women who have got a history of recurrent miscarriage. So that didn't exactly fill me with hope, but I went with it. I assumed that perhaps the consultant knew something that I didn't, and I took it as instructed every day. My appointment on the 29th of December got cancelled and moved to the 12th of January. Initially that didn't concern me too much because I felt like I was taking the medication as prescribed. Chances were everything was going to be okay. Around the first week of January I started to spot, and as much as I tried to convince myself it was a side effect of the progesterone, I knew something was going very wrong again. I called up the EPU. They wouldn't see me because I was under the care of the miscarriage clinic. They told me to speak to them. I called up the miscarriage clinic, who said, don't worry, just come along to your appointment on the 12th of January. I sort of figured that by that point, if it was what I thought it was, that was going to be too late, but they weren't overly helpful. Then I got a phone call a few days later to say that my appointment on the 12th of January had been cancelled and moved to the 29th of January. And I freaked out. I knew that I was miscarrying. I knew that I needed to see my consultant, and I just couldn't. Nobody would help me. The EPU wouldn't see me. The woman I spoke to on the phone couldn't help me. I felt so completely hopeless because I knew I was miscarrying, and I knew there could potentially be something that could save me, and I couldn't access it because no one would let me see my consultant. It was... the futility of the whole situation was absolutely heartbreaking because it just felt so pointless. I'd been so excited that I had answers and that someone thought they could help me have a healthy baby, and then suddenly that someone just didn't seem to care. They just kept cancelling my appointments, and even when I knew that the worst was happening, still nobody would help me. And it was really, really, really hard. Eventually they were able to stick me into cancellation on the 15th of January, and on the 12th I went to the EPU to see if they would scan me, but they took a pregnancy test and by that point it was negative. I'd lost the baby and I just hadn't passed it yet because the progesterone was keeping it all in. I stopped taking the progesterone that day and the bleeding started that night, and I miscarried again. For the 5th time, I went into my appointment at the miscarriage clinic on the Monday, and it was a really, really, really difficult appointment because I saw a different consultant this time, and she openly said progesterone doesn't help, and it certainly doesn't help if you don't start it mid-cycle. I was told to start it as soon as I found out I was pregnant. She said I should have been told to start it 2 weeks before that. And she also said that there's no reason I shouldn't have taken HCG. And she also said that HCG more than likely would have worked. I came away from that appointment feeling hopeful because she said I can have HCG next time, but also feeling completely gutted because I'd lost a baby again, and I really needn't have. If I'd have just had the care and the treatment that I should have done, the chances are I wouldn't have miscarried again. And that, of all the miscarriages, I think has been one of the hardest things to overcome, because to them it's just another miscarriage. It's something they deal with day in, day out. To me, that's my life and my baby that I've lost, and I needn't have done. And that was really, 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 really heartbreaking. And probably, although in terms of my miscarriages, in some ways the 5th was the easiest because I've gotten so used to it by now. I mean, it was only 4 weeks ago, and it seems like so much longer. I feel like I just kind of skipped over that one. But I think that's because self-preservation wouldn't let me think about it too much, because if I think about it too much, it's too painful. because it could have been prevented, and that's really, really, really hard to come to terms with. That's where I'm at now. That's where I am. I'm 4 weeks on from my 5th miscarriage, and I still really, 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 really want a 4th baby. I know that to some people that might seem greedy. As soon as you start trying for a family, you always have in your mind a picture of what that family is going to look like, and for me it's always been 4 children. And I think in some ways it would be easier if someone just said to me, there's a problem here and you can't have any more children. I think if someone said that, it would be easier to close the door. As things stand, I should be able to have another one, and that's why I keep trying. And I just really, really, really hope that we do get another rainbow, because the thought of going through all this and then not, the thought of going through all that for nothing is really hard. I know I keep saying that about everything, it's really hard, but it is the whole thing. Trying for a baby and keeping a baby and miscarrying and all of it, it's all so hard. And I just hope that by making these videos and by talking about my own experiences, if that can just encourage one person to feel able to talk about their own experiences, then all the better. The biggest problem I've faced through all of this has been the attitudes and the reaction from the medical community, and the support just hasn't been there. No one talks about it, so the emotional impact and the real nitty-gritty of what it does to women like me and other women who go through this, no one really gets it, because we just keep it inside. We don't tell anybody, we just bottle it up and we just plod on. So it's treated like such an insignificant thing, and it's not. It is worlds crumbling for these women. And until we can start to open up and be honest about how devastating it is to us and to our families, it's not going to get the treatment and the attitude that it deserves. That's all I hope for really with these videos. So thank you for watching and following along and all your messages. It's been really nice to hear from some of you. Where I'm at now is that I'm still really wanting a 4th. We're still definitely going to try again. I will update you as and when I have any exciting news to share. But yeah, thank you so much for watching these videos, being so supportive, and I really hope that you found it helpful or informative or just something that you can relate to. As always, feel free to message me. I'll put the details below. Thanks guys. Bye.